It's been a while since we talked about mercenary groups like Blackwater, which were used in the war in Iraq quite a bit. But we have big news from earlier this week when a federal judge sentenced a former Blackwater worldwide security guard to life in prison and sentenced 3 others to 30-year terms for killing 14 unarmed civilians in a Baghdad traffic circle in 2007. This was U.S. District Judge Royce Lamberth, who says that a claim of innocence by Nicholas Slatton, 31 years old, of Tennessee, is to be rejected. He received a life sentence after being convicted of murder in October for firing what prosecutors said were the first shots in a civilian massacre. There were 3 others involved here: Paul Slough, 35 years old, Evan Liberty, 32 years old, and Dustin Hurd, 33 years old, who were sentenced to 30 years plus 1 day in prison after being convicted of multiple counts of manslaughter and attempted manslaughter. The 1 day thing, my understanding is that it's a sentencing thing, that if you're sentenced to 30 years, you're up for parole after 10. But if it's any more than 30 years, you're not up for parole until 20 years. So I believe, Lewis, I could be wrong, that that's the significance of a 30-year plus 1 day sentence.
Okay. Yeah, I was unaware of that, but sounds good.
Every single one of the defendants is vowed to appeal what one of them called a, quote, perversion of justice, saying they were acting in self-defense in a war zone, in a dangerous place. However, the judge does not agree. It is clear that these fine young men just panicked. The overall wild thing that went on here can just not be condoned by a court. A court must recognize the severity of the crimes committed, including the number of victims. I understand. I'm on board with him saying that this can't go unpunished. I just don't know what he means by saying, I'm sure these were just fine young men. What does he mean? Everybody has bad days. Some days you're in a bad mood and you might be rude to a waiter, and some days you murder a bunch of people, but you're a fine young man. I don't understand the point of throwing in, I'm sure these are fine young men.
Well, I think the point is to show that this was perhaps not an intentional massacre, a deliberate massacre, or maybe even not a malicious one. I think that, you are in a war zone and you do panic, but what he's saying is, even if you panic, you must still be held accountable. And this was just too heinous to let him off the hook.
The guards said that they acted in self-defense after they came under fire from AK-47 gunfire. However, this was a 10-week trial, and according to the judge, no witness testified that they saw any guards come under fire, nor was there even evidence that suggested there were AK-47 rifles carried by Iraqi insurgents in that area at that time. So I think that there's a lot of evidence presented in the case which suggests that fine young men or not, panic or not, there has to be serious punishment here, given the number of people that were killed. This was not a license to kill, which, as we've talked about mercenary groups a lot, Lewis. There was this license to kill mentality. We're here with guns and we're not part of the military and we can kind of do whatever we want. And this case, at least, which may be a precedent-setting case, says, no, you cannot do whatever you want.
Think about all the cases that we didn't hear about, or there were no cases, the incidents that we didn't hear about, where some Blackwater mercenaries or other mercenary outfits killed 1 civilian, 2 civilians, maybe 3.
Right.
That probably happened hundreds of times. But this was the big one. And look how long it took for this to happen.